Hi there, welcome to this episode, if you like, of a series I'm calling Leaders I Love. And today I have with me Cassie Roma, who is a San Diego girl transplanted in Auckland. How long ago did you come here?
I hate to say, but it was almost 18 years ago now. It makes me feel so old.
But that means you've very much got one foot planted in both camps, and you may be a San Diego girl, but I would say you're probably pretty much a Kiwi girl by now as well.
Card carrying, passport carrying Kiwi. Very proud Kiwi.
Amazing.
Yes.
Other people will know you as a storyteller, a public speaker, a writer, and a media strategist. And if we look at the work that you've done, through your career, you've been head of content for some of New Zealand's most beloved brands. You've developed your own business, CR and Co. You operate or live for a certain amount of time in the world of podcasting with Benevolent Banter. There's so much that you seem to do, but I think it all seems to come back to the heart of the story of people and their experiences. Would that be right?
That's right. When you frame it like that, I was thinking, gosh, how do I put all of that together? And flashing through my brain, which is really funny, I hadn't planned any of this, was my grandmother's face. It's her 92nd birthday today, or would have been.
Wow.
And my grandma was the storyteller. We could sit around a table with her for 10 hours as kids and just sip sweet tea and just listen to grandma yarn. So yes, storyteller.
Well, it's how we all were brought into the world, isn't it? I mean, I suppose not every single person, but those of us fortunate enough to have had stories from our own parents, right from the beginning, it was nursery rhymes and, fairy stories and things like that. And they are so powerful. And I love so much of your social media content because either they're talking about your stories or they're inviting us, other people, to consider our own stories and how we show up. And that's what this series, Leaders I Love, is really all about. It's not so much about people's bios and what they've done, not even what they've done during COVID, but it's how they're showing up. Because I've noticed so many people just really kind of showing up wholeheartedly with courage and really genuinely giving of themselves and connecting so generously. And so I've invited you here today to talk and get to the heart of you, not just what you've done, but you and how you find a pathway to show up as you have been, which is so full of positivity. And I know that you are known to be a complete sucker for positivity. And you released a story just today, on the day that we are speaking, about a lady boss of yours from years gone by who took you into a meeting room to talk about how you were far too positive and how you needed to be taken down a peg or two. I can't believe that.
It's an interesting, it's a pattern that's emerged throughout my career as I've moved from place to place and gotten more and more curious about how we apply storytelling to channels and to business and to strategy. And it's always been that, and it has always been women managers too who have pulled me aside and said things like, "You are too nice. Stop asking people how they are. How do you know who Tui is? How do you know what her kids are called? How do you know?" It's like, I can remember just stopping in silence each time and going, "Is this true? Are there hidden cameras around here? Is this happening?" But the story I shared today it was one of those moments. I think you just used the word courage. And I would say that for me, this is a courageous story to share because it was a scary, scary moment that went on around, you will not survive in this business unless people are allowed to take you down a peg at every single juncture of your success. And it was just, it set the scene for the rest of that job.
And perhaps it set the scene for your journey through the rest of your life in terms of being really clear and intentional that you want to have and hold close to you positivity and compassion. And from what I've seen, I'd also add hope and trust. And I'd love to talk with you about how how you connect to your values and what beliefs you have around those things, around positivity, around compassion, hope, and trust. Because I do believe, and I've seen in this time, COVID-19, that so many people are connecting to their values or their beliefs to fortify them so that they can hold steady for themselves and for others, and therefore show up in a way where others can trust them, and in a way where they can provide hope to others. So I'd love to ask you, what values have you been connecting to, or what beliefs have you been drawing upon in order for you to hold steady and to provide this positivity and hope to others?
I think there's a little bit of nuance to the answer to this, and we could probably talk about it all day. First and foremost, I think with age and experience and maturity comes a deeper questioning of myself and the values I do stand for. I've told this story before, but it was just a recent colleague of mine when I was working at the warehouse group, who, when we were put into a situation as a team and somebody higher above us on the pay grade made some decisions that didn't sit with her values, she could say in a meeting, "This does not fit with my values, I believe in." And I can remember sitting and watching her going, "Oh shit, I don't know if I can eloquently state what my values are to be able to go, sorry, Tui, I believe in fairness and kindness and truth, and none of these are here. So because it doesn't apply to me and my values, I can't go forward." So I felt very inspired by her. And for the last year or so, I've been digging into my value set and the things that I just said, like truthfulness and honesty and compassion and kindness. All of those help me operate on a daily basis as a human, as a mother, as a wife, and then at work as a colleague and a friend and a leader. And all of those underpin an optimism. So I've kind of changed my words from positivity to optimism. And I think positivity, people, especially in work situations, sometimes can think, okay, American accent, curious, outgoing, all of these things. And then if you add positivity to that, Lord forbid, it's too much. So optimism denotes a presence of being in the moment and going, this COVID situation sucks. It's shit. It's horrible. It's all across the world. Back home in the States, people are at, 80,000 people have died. I just got a phone call today that COVID's running rampant through the old folks home where my grandmother is. So all of these hard things are happening. But optimism is the promise that good will come. It's the silver lining. And so I try to comport myself with compassion and an optimistic view of the world. And by doing so and leaning into my values, now that I can more eloquently put them into words, it's a lot easier to show up as myself and to be able to give. I truly believe in the give. When it comes to content, when it comes to storytelling, it's all about, how is this going to resonate with Tui? How is she going to feel? And then out of it for me, I go, now when will she tell me her story? Because there's nothing I love more than hearing somebody else's story.
Yeah. And that's connection, isn't it? And through this whole crisis, through COVID, I can speak for myself, but certainly I've seen others too, connecting to so many new and different people, connecting in so many different ways. And, in that way, stepping into our courage and into our brave hearts. It's not necessarily natural for people to sit in front of a camera and talk, and even to sit in front of Zoom on a meeting, where you would normally be in the office around a table. It's all new for us, and it does take courage. And whilst we can be, and you are, optimistic, we do also have our low days. And, in your storytelling and in your very authentic sharing of yourself, you do share with us your low days and the hard times. And our friend Brene Brown calls it embracing the suck. You talked about it just before as, being a bit sucky sometimes. So I'd love to ask you what practices or rituals you use to help you dive into the shadow and tread the murky waters of uncertainty.
Look, I think, and again, spoke about the evolution or just getting older and having life experience over the past, I'm going to say 5 years, my life has flipped upside down completely. It's done a 180. And what I found is that I've survived every day so far. Some days have been really bad. There's been days of deep, dark depression, suicidal ideation, anxiety, all of these things that nobody would potentially paint an optimistic person with. To see it in myself and to see it in others means that the daily practices that I feel every single one of us can put into motion to maintain that optimism is simply to be present. And I think it was Brene Brown who was talking about the idea of presence as the past is gone, the future is not here yet. If you are in this moment right now, I'm talking to you, you're talking to me, I'm not hungry, I'm warm, I know I'm loved, and we've got, running water and electricity. Then we go, okay, all of my basic needs are met. I'm okay. And once you can sit with that, discomfort, and you can unpack, I'm okay, I'm going to survive, then you're able to step into okay, what's the next thing I need to do to grow or to have a better day tomorrow?
Yeah, I so get that. I mean, through these last few weeks, I am a practitioner of well-being in a sense. I'm a yoga and meditation teacher, so I have a lot of practices that I use to keep me present, to keep me really grounded, to keep anxiety at bay, etc., etc. So going into, when New Zealand went into lockdown level 4, the first thing I did was reframe lockdown to home retreat, so that as a family we talked about retreating from school and retreating from
I love that
being together.
I stole that from you. It's so good. Yeah,
I mean, it made such a difference. And I would read little notes in my daughter's diaries that talk about home retreat is really fun. It's just like being at school, but mummy's the teacher and we get to play a lot more. And, it gave them a totally different perspective as opposed to locked in and locked down. Yeah. And, I talked to a friend of mine who has a child who was almost the opposite, not loving it at all, and in fact very angry and frustrated at being locked in at home. And that's not to say she wasn't using the right language by any means, but it just showed me the power of words, of language, and I think also the power of curiosity, because as you say, when you're present and you're not thinking about the past and you're not thinking about the future, what that actually opens up is a spaciousness to be curious about the now. And I know you're a naturally curious person, and so I was reading about this guy Robert McKee. He's an international master of screenwriting. And he says, and I'm just reading here, he says, curiosity is the intellectual need to answer questions and close open patterns. Story plays to this universal desire by doing the opposite, posing questions and opening situations. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on that, what that brings up for you as a storyteller.
Yeah, I thought about that quote on my walk this morning. I had to read it about 5 different times. And when I thought about it, I thought that's a very interesting take on curiosity, but my take on it, my inner narrative, because there's a little tug in my gut when I was reading it and I couldn't understand what the tug was. And I think for me, it's almost the opposite. The curiosity for me is the intellectual search for the patterns. But once you start to see them, it's not the closing of them, it's the opening of them. It's the understanding that the more I know, the less I know. And I know that sounds a little bit cliche or hippie, but it's one of those things where I don't know if it was my Montessori childhood. I don't know if it was, my mom's from Missouri, which is called the show me state, which is like, let's ask all the questions, show me. But I've always been curious, and it's the things that I can't quite put my finger on or that I can't close off that keep me going back. And I think that's why I love storytelling, and probably why I fell into a profession like marketing and advertising on the digital and social kind of emerging tech and platform side, because it was taking something that I understood, which is your story cycle, your beginning, middle, end, and how you can package that up. But then it's taking all of these new technology and platforms that we haven't even tapped into, and it's understanding that art enhances and creates the tech, but then the tech comes to a point where it can't handle the art, and then it tips it the other way. So curiosity for me is an openness instead of a closing of.
So interesting. And there's always so many different perspectives and takes on any quote. I think there's a difference between, and I like to think about the difference between curiosity and then mystery. And, you know, I can't necessarily define the two, but curiosity does have an open inquisitiveness to it. Mystery also, but it's almost like this, I don't know, like there's a visceral feeling for me that comes with the mystery and the intrigue of what may be. And, you know, I think about that as we think about and move towards, you know, level 2 and whatever the new normal is. I don't really like that phase, but I do think about it as being mysterious and full of possibility, and you know, a canvas to ask so many questions, and to your point, to create new art. And that could be, you know, the organizational design that we move forward into. It could be the art of team development, teamwork, and it could just be the art of self and showing up in a new and different way. So I've got lots of questions for myself in terms of how I will move forward. What question or questions are big in your mind at the moment?
I think for me, the questions are similarly in the same regards as to some of the answers that I've found in the last 8 weeks during this time. They're really simple and they're basic, and they go back like things like New Zealand has done so well, and we have come together collectively. Like you talked about earlier about how we utilize language in our words. You know, New Zealand was, let's unite against this. Let's be a team of 5 million. The United States was alone together.
I saw that. I couldn't believe that when you posted that. I was like, instantly, I was like, oh, that feels cold.
Especially when you hear, so I was hearing it a lot in podcasts from back home, and they'd be like, we are alone together. And you're like, whoa, holy shit, no wonder we're having issues. So like going straight back to that, my basic questions are, and to your point, not liking the term new normal, is when do I get to see my parents again? Are my brother's 3 little children going to grow up before I get to hug them again? And then I move into, okay, from a business perspective, when I launched CR & Co 3 days before a global pandemic, I had beautiful business plans. I had great strategies. I had a way forward. I had, you know, as much money as I needed on the books to get through. And then it was 3 days later, and it was a literal tear up, erase the whiteboard and start again. So the questions I ask of myself, and that I have been for the last 8 weeks, as I've ridden the roller coaster of, you know, ugly weeping on the floor to really excitedly working with small businesses in New Zealand, is how, again, how do I help? And that's always the question. Pre-COVID, it's been that. Post, it'll be that. How can I help? And when we talk about language again, when we started to hear more about essential workers and, you know, the people who are keeping this world going right now, putting themselves, their lives, their livelihoods at risk simply by doing their jobs, I felt a tug at my own ego going, I am non-essential. How do I live with non-essential? And I asked my brother, he's a doctor on the front lines in Detroit. I was like, Rob, how do people like me who create podcasts and help businesses with strategies and work in social media, how do I help somebody who's essential? And he was like, Cass, you've got platforms. Share information, share stories, help people feel better, help. And I was like, of course, the little brother always nails it, you know, like so wise for one so young. So for me, it's been that existential question of how do I help?
Yeah. I love that, because it is so simple. And I think what so many of us have experienced over these last few weeks at home is the stripping away of all the non-essential stuff that we would, gather around us, the stripping away of all of the busyness, to simplicity. And so if we can stop and find stillness and listen within and ask simple questions of ourselves, like, how can I help? I think that's a great place to start. And just in terms of what you said about, I guess, the labels of, being an essential worker or not, I always think, and I always speak to my clients about the fact that we are more than our role. We are so much more, and we mustn't define ourselves by any labels that are out there, because we are fully human people that are built up, from and with values and beliefs and strengths and natural talents. And I think that's important to remind people about as we do hear these labels, and even the labels of level 4 and level 3 and the new normal. As far as normal goes, I just think there is no normal anymore. There just is what is now.
That's right. That goes back to presence. And if you can ground yourself in what's happening now, we can set plans and hope for the best, but to become more resilient, we just have to be present. We have to sit in discomfort. We have to embrace that suck. Brene Brown talks about the FFTs as well, the fucking first times. And wow, I felt like a novice and a rookie so much over the last 8 weeks. And thank goodness for my family, because without them, I could potentially be a wreck. And also without Brene, which we have actually named our coffee machine Brene Black, because it's a black machine. And we can shout out every morning, thank you, Brene. So it's those little constant tickles, right, that remind us of just grounding ourselves in the present. And it sounds simple, but it's not, because we can all get worked up in, where are we going? What does level 2 look like? What does level 1 look like? When do we get to just hug our friends again? Those little things.
Totally. And we can get caught up in that. And I think what that then does is it starts to create stories in our minds. It projects the future as a story into our minds, and that can kind of take us into this ruminating spiral of what may be, when in actual fact we just don't know day to day what may be, what is going to be. So I think we need to be cognizant of the stories we tell ourselves in our mind, and then finding a way to detach from those stories, which are often generated by the inner critic, to be present enough to ask the simple questions like you talked about, and to really intentionally create the story of our new selves and our new lives as we step forward. And so as a storyteller, the storyteller that you are, I would love to ask if you have a question, or you could share a question or two to those who are watching, to help them craft their story, perhaps the journey of their story through COVID and their emergence out the other side. Anything that you can guide people with?
Yes, I have a question, but I was just thinking about what you said about, as we build stories in our mind, and we then think, when those stories don't come true in the future, that something's wrong or something's happened. I think the most woke or waking amongst us, and for me, that's all thankful to therapy, are able to go, oh shit, I'm feeling really anxious, or I'm feeling a dissonance in my professional career or my life right now, because I've set up steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. COVID hit and it's back here. We might already been at 3 and now we're back to 2. It's reframing those things in our minds. I really, really resonate with what you just said. To the question that I think people can ask themselves, that all of us should ask ourselves, regardless of the times, but especially now in such uncertain times, is just what is my purpose? And that is a big, heavy question. I ask myself that every day, and quite often the answer is, it's, for me, my purpose is to show up in the world, to be helpful, to be generous of spirit, and to serve, but also to help others shine. I love it when other people light up, when they're successful, when I can lift them and go, look at what this person did.
Mm.
That just really gets my motor running. And once you know what gets your motor running, you're able to then ground yourself in, okay, what's my story? I know what I'm passionate about. I know what I'm purposeful in. I know what's driving me and getting up in the morning.
Mm.
Now, how do I apply that to my professional life, to my personal life, to my relationships, and then move forward?
Mm. It is a big question, what is my purpose? But I love how you broke it down and talked about, you know, what in my own words, I'm paraphrasing you, but what lights you up? Because, you know, I've asked that question over the years, time and time again, you know, what's my purpose? What's my business purpose? And it feels big and it feels hard. But like you, when I break it down to say, well, you know, what are my values and what really lights me up? And if I think about the times when I have been lit up in my life and just firing on all cylinders and feeling, you know, on top of the world, what was I doing? Then
Yes.
it's quite easy to go, okay, so maybe there's something in that, maybe my purpose, or where I find, maybe we don't say what is my purpose, but where do I find purpose? And like you said, how can I be purposeful? It makes it more of a moving verb, doesn't it?
I like that.
It's defining us.
I like that. Yes.
Yeah.
Because it will be ever evolving, right?
Exactly.
How boring would we be if we were the same person we were 10 years ago?
Oh,
Like,
completely.
I mean, I think I was an okay person, but wow, I'm a lot more fun now.
Oh my God, I was so different 10 years ago. You know, I've been through this whole yoga and meditation journey, which, you know, it to be honest, it was really hard on my relationship with my husband because I was diving deep and discovering new philosophies and new ways of being. And in fact, my values didn't change. I really got clear on those about 15 years ago. So the core of me didn't change, but there was a lot that did. And it was rocky for a time, but because I was so clear on how I was coming home to myself through that process, I could explain that to him and say, you know, this is part of my journey, but at my core, I still value the same things. We have a family together. And actually, I don't feel like I'm becoming. I feel like I'm unbecoming all of the layers that was put upon me to actually find and reveal myself. And you know who that is at the heart because we've been together. I've been with him for 20 years. So it was, I guess in a way, I'm sitting here thinking I had to actually kind of tell my story to him and you know, almost invite him to kind of turn the pages and for us to kind of be on that journey together, I suppose.
That's awesome. I love the idea of unlearning. And I've spent a lot of time over this COVID era as it's begun and hit all of us globally, unlearning reasons even for why. So we talked earlier about social media sharing. And for me, I think one of the biggest gives I can put out into the world right now is an honesty that isn't filtered. It doesn't mean I have to share, you know, warts and all with folks on, say, LinkedIn, a professional channel, but it does mean that to be an authentic human being and to be a good leader, I need to lead by doing. And that means going, today was shit. It was hard. It was wobbly, and it's okay. Tomorrow will potentially be a better day. But it's been the unlearning of, oh, maybe I shouldn't put that out there because, or sometimes it's the opposite. And it's like, I really want to put this post out because I want to see how many likes it gets. And I'm going to really just play this algorithm all the way out. And then the second I'm about to hit send, they go, that doesn't fit with your values. And it's a delete and put it away.
Yeah. And you know, that comes back to exactly what you've said, which is having the presence of mind and the mindfulness, not to just react and do it, but to kind of respond to any feelings you're having and ask yourself, do I really want to, or don't I want to? And it's all part of the journey. which brings me to one of the questions I wanted to ask you about. You will have heard of Stephen Pressfield, who's a prolific writer and storyteller, and he talks about the hero's journey as one that precedes the artist's journey. And so if story is art, and we all have our own stories and are continually evolving our own stories, then we could say we are all artists. So how do you, as a storyteller, as an artist, access the muse and become inspired?
I love this. For me, the hard thing is quieting the muse. And there's been a few points in my adult life where I'm like, I feel like potentially maybe this isn't something that everybody feels. A lot of my good friends are musicians, they're artists. But from between the age of 14 and 20, I wrote over 3,000 poems and lyrics and worked with local bands, and my brain was always on. I could see a leaf on the ground and write you a love song, one of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Studied photography and videography, and it was, I say out of necessity, I became a very accidental professional when it comes to marketing and advertising, because I had to pay the bills when I had a child and married young. So for me, accessing the muse it just comes naturally. I think everybody has access to whatever their muse might be, but again, it's rooted in presence. The more present you can be. I love the way Elizabeth Gilbert talks about creativity and how she feels like the muse floats through us, and we can either choose to create in that moment, or it's gone and somebody else might get that idea and create that instead. And you know, we're always in our house creating funny little silly songs, and it's consistent. So for me, accessing the muse is a lot of the time turning off the digital screens, putting the phone down, and just writing down what is coming through me. And something, it feels bigger than us.
Yeah. So it's not just being present with devices or anything else, it's actually switching off the distractions so that you don't have the sensory overload, so that you can actually almost probably feel the vibration and the sensation of, you know, whatever creativity is coming through you. Would that be right?
Yeah. And you know, strangely enough, I'm an introvert who parades and looks like an extrovert. I quite often at about 5-6 o'clock at night am just done. My poor wife and daughter, at about 7 o'clock every night, I'm like, too much stimulation on the floor, and they're like, oh God, here she goes. But for me, I call my meditation in motion. So I'll go for walks in the morning, and I'll usually, if I need to get something done, I'll plant a seed before I go. And then maybe I'll walk for an hour, maybe I'll walk for 3 hours. It depends on how long I need to feel that muse move through me. And when I feel like something needs to be noted or written down, then that happens. But you do have to make space, not just to hear the muse, but to create. So the creation off the back of it is where people, I find, fall short in that. You know, lots of people say to me, how do you have the time? How do you have the time to do a podcast, to write all of the blogs, to build your website, to have a business, and it's like, well, kind of just like doing all that stuff. And as long as I make time for it, then it flows.
Yeah, I so get that. And the thing that we have all had over these last few weeks is, well, I shouldn't say we all, I can't speak for everyone, but many of us have had more time because we haven't had the commutes. We haven't had all the after-school activities. We haven't had all of everyone else's expectations for us to be seeing and spending time with them. And so it's fascinating to me, and it's going to be really interesting to see how people transition to life outside their four walls, and what we all take with us in terms of a sense of spaciousness, not only so that we can create, but so that we can actually move through life in a way that is more intentional and, you know, better for us, I think.
And it goes back to what you said earlier, and I truly believe this, and I think I probably overstated, is that we are not our titles. We are not our output as defined by a business or a brand or a boss or words on a paper that say, this is your job. You know, we talked about my grandma at the very beginning. She was a mother of 6 kids. She was an English war bride who ended up in a town of 200 in the middle of nowhere, Missouri. And she's the most important person in my life. She didn't have a title. She didn't make $250K a year. So for me, this time and the extra time you talked about has been so grounding, because I've been able to go, oh, so the people I love the most didn't chase that stuff. That wasn't what mattered. Yeah. And it's been a lovely, illuminating time, also filled with fear and anxiety. But for those of us lucky enough to have the time, it's been fantastic.
It's a gift to have realizations like that. And I think you are alluding to something that I did want to ask you before we finish up, which is, what did you never consider before these last few weeks, before COVID, that now seems possible?
Wow, that's a really good question. I'm the kind of person who has always believed that all things are possible, but usually for other people. I will happily lift you, Tui, and tell you, you can go do whatever you want. The sky's the limit. But when it comes to me, there was always this mental box that I put myself into and went, this is as far as you can go. That little tiptoe out is brave enough. But over the last 8 weeks, there's been a lot of time where I've just literally gone, fuck it. You know, I'm going to send that email. I'm going to ask that person if I can chat to them. I'm going to call my friend and go, hey, this is a burning question that I need your help on. And every single person has just responded with such kindness and the giving that I feel like I want to give to the world, they've given back to me in return. So I feel like it's been unpacking my own barriers. The own walls I built for myself have started to come down, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so maybe for you, it's possible to think and believe that there is so much more freedom and so much more connection than you had ever considered possible or ever experienced before.
That's right. And that's another beautiful thing about, so social media can be a rough, tough place to be in, but social media has also been this beautiful connective tissue through all of this. Everything from, for the last, I think, 50 days, I've been watching every single Melissa Etheridge live stream at 10 a.m. And it has been amazingly hilarious to watch her and her wife fumble through the tech and then go through and just listen to music and see all of this commentary and have this group of people that I'd never known before, that it's like, okay, there's this little community now. And then you can go the opposite way to businesses going, we just want to help, we're going to show up. And it feels like this global community has gotten so much more connected. And I find that so beautiful, because my brain was thinking New Zealand, Australia, APAC. That was where I was thinking. And now it's like, actually, that person in New York City who I know now, we can have a chat to. We can have a virtual coffee, and it feels just like you and I, not too far apart.
Yeah. The possibility of a truly boundaryless world, I think. And yes, speaking of you and I, we've never chatted before yet. Obviously we've communicated on social media. And so this is one of these examples of new and perhaps unexpected connections, which I'm truly grateful for. Thank you so much for joining me here today to share more of you and your heart and your story.
Thank you for asking me. I just absolutely love the content, the sass, the fun you put into the world. So it was an easy yes.
Thank you so much, and have a wonderful afternoon. And don't go forward into a new normal. Go forward into an amazing life full of possibility for yourself.
And you too, my friend.